Hello there, this is Pat Coakley, and welcome to Voices from My Bunker. Today I'm going to introduce you to my very, very favorite niece, Alice, who is a first grade teacher in Washington, D.C. in a Catholic school. And I just think we're not hearing enough of the stories of how teachers responded to the initial lockdown for many of us from March until June 2020. We all know that schools are a very hot topic right at the moment, since most teachers really don't know what is going to happen in September. But today we're just going to focus in on what happened from March to June, what she experienced herself as a teacher, what she feels her students and parents experienced, and what lessons that she learned. I knew she'd be a great interview because she's passionate about her job. She loves her kids, and I really was touched by this interview. And even though I'm in constant contact with her and was throughout this March through June period, by asking her some questions that I would have asked a teacher that I had no idea about, I learned some things. And P.S., I had Alice and her two boys here for a COVID-19 picnic on my porch. Oh, people, I am like a flop at doing this. I say 6 feet apart, and there I am ladling something out to somebody's bowl that's on their lap. Or I don't know how people do it, even if they want to follow the rules. And hello, we can see from the news that a lot of people don't even care to follow the rules, but I do. And I was like a total flop. So anyway, I wish that was the least of our problems. But for right now, I'm going to introduce you to Alice. And my first question to her was, just take me back to when she first heard about COVID and when she realized that it was going to profoundly impact her life.
So there was talk about the virus from the beginning of March on. Parents would say, have you heard anything about how we're going to handle this? And, you know, people were dropping off big vats of hand sanitizer and things like that. I think they were a little bit like, what is the school doing? We haven't heard what the school is doing yet.
They were nervous.
And
yeah.
They were nervous. They were listening to the news. We had not got any word from, above about this. So we actually, in my school, never knew we were going to go to virtual learning until about 2 days, I think it was like March 11th. And March 13th was the last day.
And when were you supposed to start virtual learning?
The 16th. We started that Monday.
So, okay, let me get this right. The school closes on
the 13th.
The 13th. And you
went live Monday.
Okay. Now, are teachers at your school trained for virtual learning?
No. What happened was on like the 11th, in my case, the platform that they used, Seesaw, I had actually introduced that to the school. I learned about it in archdiocesan-wide professional training. It was a really good thing to use in the classroom, and I had never really been able to use it because the technology is not, it's certainly not one-to-one, and there was always issues.
Okay.
But I kind of knew how to do it, and it is an easier one, like an easier one to do. We do have one-to-one in the middle school, and so I think that the middle school teachers were like, they sort of knew a little bit on how they would format it, but the younger grades did not really have the training, so that was really stressful for a lot of people. I kind of knew how to do it, but I still was daunted by just the formation it would be. We hadn't really even talked about asynchronous and synchronous learning.
Okay, let me ask you this, because I'm coming at this really not knowing what the software is that you just described.
Right, sure.
But is that software that you had introduced and was in the school, even if it was confusing, had you as a first grade teacher used it with your students before?
I personally had never used it with students.
Okay.
I had attempted to use it. It had never been successful because of the connectivity in my room and stuff. But very luckily, when we kind of knew, like, well, you know, maybe they should learn this, because if we end up doing some of this, it might be, my kids had a technology class on Thursday the 11th, and the technology teacher said, I think I'm going to teach it to them. And I said, good, because it, you know, and so they learned it in that, you know, in a rudimentary way. And then they went home Friday, and we started Monday with that.
Oh my gosh.
I know. The parents were amazing on how they helped. There were a few in my class, a few parents that were really frustrated with it, and I really understood that. And also, I had gotten some really good advice. I felt lost. Like, I didn't understand how to structure it. And so I went looking online, and through the Seesaw, which was the platform program, they had professional development things. Okay. And they also had an interview with somebody who had gone through this already during COVID in Hong Kong. Oh. And that was the thing that helped me the most.
So a teacher in Hong Kong who obviously they got the virus before we did.
Yes.
Had
and how
figured
they
this
handled
platform out for her needs.
And exactly.
Okay.
So I was not getting most of my professional development on this from the school itself. However, the tech teacher was very responsive throughout the whole thing. Okay. But as far as like learning how to roll it out, I did it that weekend with that help. And it was really good because these people had, you know, worked as a group to, you know, figure out what was most important, you know, and we were talking about small children. So they were like, you can't do more than 2 hours a day. They're little. That's not what they should be doing, you know, with their time.
Right.
Is sitting in front of a computer the whole time. And a lot of it was about checking in with them. Like, make sure there's an activity that they can tell you how they're feeling that day, because you can't replace that in a classroom very easily of your impressions of their state.
Right.
And we weren't, even in the beginning, we were not having very much live teaching at all. So sometimes that little smile face or frowny face or worried face was the only thing I knew about it.
Wow.
Because they would use these emojis and stuff.
When did the live stuff begin?
So just when we had it kind of set up that I was doing math and reading and writing, some activities with that, grammar, we were told in the first 2 weeks, don't introduce anything new. Just practice what you've already learned. So it was, you know, go and practice these sight words and record yourself saying them, or
So it was all
read the
audio
story.
to the students.
It was a variety of video things and little exercises or check marks or quick explanations, things like that.
And
Pictures,
where did you get the videos?
Seesaw comes with that.
Okay.
An ability to make a very short video, like a minute and a half.
All right. So you
And
make a
sometimes
video.
that's
of it.
enough.
Okay. All
I
right.
would make a video. Sometimes I would take a video from YouTube
Okay.
and use that if I was introducing or if I was doing a phonic sound. I would have a video. I would attach the video to it, and then they would, generate 2 or 3 words with that sound or something like that.
Yeah.
But very short activities. And there were checklists like read for 20 minutes and then write 1 sentence about what you learned, your favorite part of the book,
Okay.
something like that.
Yeah.
So then that took us up to about what would have been what our spring break was. And we actually took an Easter break.
So
And
we're
right
into
before
April.
Easter break, right before Easter break, the principal said we have to do more live teaching. So you have to develop a schedule so that the specials teachers can have, a class, and then you also have to have, group lessons every day. Some teachers did whole group lessons. I did small group lessons just because I found it easier over Zoom. Like, we had to introduce the Zoom schedule.
That's when Zoom came into play.
Yes. And that was so tricky, just schedule-wise, and for the parents too.
How many students in your class?
24.
And they're how old?
6 to 7.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the scheduling was really hard because, for example, one student in my class, and he wasn't the only one in this situation, but I just saw the visual of it a lot.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness. So the parents both work, but the dad actually left every day to work.
Yeah.
And the mother was at home working.
Right.
And she had 3 kids. The oldest was in my class.
Oh, gosh.
And and she's very organized. She actually really helped me with the Zoom schedule. Like, she's like, well, I do this, and then I put everything in my Google Calendar and all that. But it was too much.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
And she has, and when I say 3 children, so she had 2 of them were at St. Peter's. So they sometimes had like conflicting Zoom calendars.
Oh, God.
And she just made the executive decision like, well, James is going to go to Vivian's today. Like,
Right.
what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah. Triage, really. Really. You just.
Yeah, it was really a lot for everybody. And, I felt like, that building the plane as you fly it was absolutely what happened. And that to me was the most challenging, is integrating that whole schedule and communicating all those links in a way that they could have easy access to them, like at all times. There were a lot of people that didn't have printers at home and never got printers for the whole process. And so that created its own challenge of giving assignments. So then when we got that kind of all settled, it was the end, it was the end of the quarter, and and the Archdiocese decided, well, we have to do more live teaching and assessing. And so there had to be grades introduced, and that created its own thing. Then there was a lot of paperwork on the stuff we weren't going to cover because you couldn't cover everything. So it was a lot. It was kind of like every 2 weeks there would be something absolutely hugely new that you had to do.
Oh, gee. Elle, let me ask you this, just a nuts and bolt question.
Yeah.
Your hours before COVID as a teacher were what in your school? When did you go to school and when did you come home?
I would usually be about 7:30 to 4:15.
Okay.
My contract, or I don't have a contract, but my regular hours that I have to be there are 8 to 4.
Okay.
So not much, and I would do some work at home, but not tons. I mean, I would do some correcting, but not a ton.
Right.
And if I had like bigger plans, I would put those together. If I had to shop and buy things, I would do that on the weekend. But for the most part, I could get, because I taught that grade for 5 years. So
Right.
I kind of knew how to use my time that way. And that's what my husband noticed, is just such an increase in hours.
Well, tell me about that. What was your virtual learning teacher hours?
Right. The hours that I was available to parents, like online and all that, that was about 7 o'clock to about 5 o'clock.
7 a.m. to 5 p.m.?
Yeah, that was like that you were on, but that doesn't include the entire, and this I whittled down because it was kind of taking over the whole weekend. I decided I'm just going to do it Sunday. So then I started planning everything on Sundays. And I would plan from like 9 to 5 on Sundays, of just because you have to always you have to craft the lessons and load them and schedule them into the platform.
Wow.
So that everybody gets it,
Yeah.
and that takes a tremendous amount of time. Like, I even think I was getting pretty good, and because it's first grade, some things were repeat things. But that took a lot of time. So that's why when they started saying for this upcoming thing, like, oh, we can have an option, they can come to school or do virtual. And it's like, but I don't understand who's doing that.
Yeah, it has to be your twin.
Exactly.
Wow. Wow.
And it was so much better when I did it on the Sunday, because then I was more available during the day. Because before it was almost like I had to stop at about noon being responsive. Because and then all the posts that the kids make, like when they respond to something.
Oh, so they respond, and so then you have to respond to their response.
Yes. And you want them to respond, because then they've done it.
Yeah.
So it's like if I said write 3 words that have the sh sound in the middle, I would have to go back and then correct that. And you kind of want to really make a big deal about it, or they're not going to do it anymore.
Right. Wow.
So in my class, I had about 7 really, sometimes I would have between like 7 and 12 activities a day that they would have to do.
So you would then responding to each of those 20 plus students?
Yes. Now my assistant helped with that.
Okay.
She would help with that. That didn't really start until about the 4th week that she helped with it, but she did after that.
Okay. So,
but when the grading came in, I had to look at it.
Right?
Yeah, I would say, I think that's really fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And during the day, that 7 to 5 was availability to parents, but your presentation to the class itself took place in a 2-hour window, or what was that window?
Well, so I had like a Zoom call every day.
Every day.
That was, I had one Zoom call with my class. Is that right? I had one teaching Zoom call every day. On Mondays and Fridays, it was whole group. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, it was small groups. And so those were like teaching ones that were, they ranged between like 20 and 35 minutes. Okay. And then in addition to that, I was forced to do these like office hour things. Oh. And that's not going away, by the way, next year. They love that. And so that's when, if somebody like has trouble with homework or something, or can't do something, they can just drop in. And I didn't have most of the time kids didn't come to mine, and I was okay with that, but you have to sit there for an hour while no one comes.
Okay.
But like one of my friends at school said, the office hours, the parents would drop in to like commiserate.
Oh, okay.
Like, oh, well, she won't do anything today.
Oh, okay. Oh, man. Wow.
But they kept sort of adding that stuff in because I think there's like a fear. I mean, I don't really know, but I think there's like a fear if they can't see you working, then you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And it just, there was a misunderstanding, I think, on everyone's part on how long it took.
Wow, for sure. For sure.
I think that was, I
I'm
don't know.
sort of amazed, frankly, that you got up and running in the time that you did.
It was, I mean, I think some people struggled more than others, but I think as a school, we really did a good job with that.
Wow.
And that was a lot to do with the tech teacher.
Okay.
And also, like, some of the teachers are younger, so they're a little faster on learning the tech things.
Yeah.
But and the parents, that was a real collaborative thing.
Yeah.
And also, the parents in my school had good connectivity. There really were not a lot of technical issues, which I think is different than a lot of public school people.
Okay. Okay.
You know, and they had multiple, like everybody in my school at least had like a phone they could use.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let me ask you this from a teacher point of view solely. Did you learn something about teaching in this environment that you didn't know before trying this?
Yeah, it confirmed some things for me, like the relationship part is like really critical. And I think that it is going to be so different this year to go into it without a relationship with my class, which it'll be a new group for everybody.
Yeah.
To build that online is really challenging.
Wow.
You know, of just, I don't know. I struggled with that.
Can you give me an example
during the spring
of that point right there, of the previous relationship you had with a student and you saw it impacting their ability and your ability?
I would build in time on those teaching Zoom calls to also have some social time. And I could barely get a conversation to roll. Like, they really wanted to be there.
Yep.
And they would be excited to come.
Okay.
But it came, and at first you were kind of like, okay, I have to make some rules here because everyone's talking at the same time. And
right.
We can't hear and we can't get anything accomplished and we can't learn. By the end of it, I could barely get them to respond. Like, they would learn from it.
Yep.
And come back and spit back stuff, but they weren't bubbly anymore. It's like they didn't have a million stories to tell me.
Oh, isn't
and
that
I felt like that kind of wilted.
Yes.
At the end.
Wow.
But I also, there was a lot of positive stuff with the technology that I thought that I would use even if I wasn't in this situation.
Can you give me an example?
So the responses that you get from Seesaw, they can draw, they can write, they can record themselves, they can do a short little video of themselves to explain something. I thought that was fascinating as like real assessment data.
Oh.
I could get so much more from that than I could get from them on a paper and pencil test.
So the different media ways of expressing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I really understood where they were breaking down in their understanding of it, and I really understood what they knew. And it was just in a much more complex way than a paper, like a spelling test or a multiple choice test. And honestly, it didn't take that much longer to do it. like to go through and look at those things, and you could kind of immediately grade it, like, oh, okay, they're doing what I want. Oh, they're doing more than what I want. Oh, we have to go back.
So if I had a magic wand and this whole COVID world was solved, what would you add to your in-person teaching bag of tricks?
I would do a daily check-in on their feelings as they walk in.
Okay.
And that could be by technology or a picture or a magnet that they move or something. Okay. I would do that every single day. Wow. Because you do notice it a lot, but I never really made time to delve into it unless somebody was just really, truly upset.
And you would notice it wouldn't necessarily be them telling you in whatever way, which is significant too. Wow. So
I would do that every day.
Okay.
And I also would have, also as a portfolio piece, that seesaw thing was a fascinating diary of growth.
A way of really seeing the evolution.
Yes.
Okay.
The story of the learning that, I knew that would be a good thing to do. When I was in teaching school, they were like, you should have a portfolio. I just could never figure out how to manage that paper and the size. And it just seemed I would start them and they wouldn't really happen, or they would, I don't know, whatever. I would choose silly things to put in it, like, oh, here, put this mastery spelling test in. Well, that's not even interesting to look at. So,
wow. Let me ask you this.
So that part I thought was really good.
Okay. What, with respect to the students, and the real virtue of this is that you knew all your students at the time it started. Did anything surprise you about the compatibility of this with individual students that surprised you?
Right, that some kids really took to it.
Yes.
There was a real variability with that in my class.
Okay.
Some kids, one child I think in particular, maybe two, like a duck to water. I almost feel like it's a better fit for him to be homeschooled.
Really?
Now, he was lucky because he's a bright kid. His parents both work, but they were able to work from home and trade off.
Okay.
So I think that as a family, they were in a good place for it.
Yeah.
But honestly, in school, he was a good student, but I wouldn't say he was a joyous student.
Okay.
And what I saw at home was he loved being in control of how he did his work. That was a big thing that the Hong Kong school told me to do, is have them develop their own schedule that fits with their family.
Okay.
And, that's kind of that was a big debate at the beginning. Should the learning be synchronous or asynchronous? And
what
in
does
my
that
opinion,
mean?
So synchronous is more like what my neighbors had, where there's a camera on a teacher in a classroom and they're teaching a lesson and the kids are at home learning. It's like you're very much mimicking the classroom.
Okay. Like a TED Talk or something.
If I'm doing it, if I'm doing it at 9:00, it's not even a TED. No, it's like if I'm doing it at the classroom at 9:00, you check in at 5 and 9.
Okay.
And when it's over, you'll go on to your next class. So it's real in time.
Okay.
And so their schedule would be like a series of appointments during the day for learning.
Okay.
And my Zoom calls with my kids were like synchronous learning. Like I actually taught this skill
at that time.
At that time. But the things that I think the kids, even though we wanted to have them so we would have contact.
Yeah.
I think that there were a lot of kids that really liked being able to fuss with their schedule and do things ahead of time or get everything knocked out first thing in the morning, and then they would go on bike rides.
Oh, okay.
So and that was surprising to me at 6 or 7 years old, that they would figure that out.
And were you able to accommodate that?
Oh, absolutely, because since I did everything ahead of time, it was accessible to them.
Oh,
So, you know what I mean? So it's like, I think that's a good thing for a little kid to be able to manage. And I knew a little bit of that because there are elements of my day that the kids are kind of, and I mean, it doesn't sound like that great of a thing. Like, hey, you've got 5 worksheets to do them in any order you want. But they like live for that. Like, you know what I mean? I'm starting with handwriting today.
oh, okay.
Just choice over what you're doing
Yes.
was really powerful, I thought.
So if you were like at 10 o'clock teaching something about writing or reading,
Yes. Right.
that student who wanted that definite appointment at that point could sign in, listen to you, and then go and do whatever attendant work. But there could be somebody else who wasn't ready at that point who could go back and replay it.
Yes, you could. There were recordings. Those took longer to put together, so sometimes it was easier to just check in. But yeah, you could do that, and I could do recorded lessons without any students in front of me. Just do it with a series of videos and like a Google Slides thing.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out how that asynchronicity thing worked when you had to give.
If it's asynchronous, then it's a recorded lesson that I've prepared in advance.
Okay, and that's what you did in advance.
I can make synchronous learning asynchronous by like recording my conversation in Zoom.
Yep.
And they could access it later. I never found that worked as well.
Okay.
Like, I think for whatever reason, it would always take forever for that to download and for me to put it in a different place. It always seemed like all interest had died out by the time it went where it was supposed to go.
Well, see, this is what I think I am really learning. And, you and I talked a lot during this. So it's not that I wasn't exposed to some of this, but I'm really experiencing this in a much deeper way. In other words, that Sunday that you did the pre-planning and pre-work.
Yep.
And I presume some of that asynchronicity
absolutely
content actually, in your experience overall, that 6th day that you did that really paid off for.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow. And that had nothing to do with your 5-day work. And had you limited it to 5-day, you wouldn't have been able to create this whole curriculum that could be asynchronous. No. Wow.
And also, it's not something that was universal in my school because we didn't really talk about that stuff.
Okay.
And that to me was kind of just an interesting thing. I would love to know if that was true in other schools. I feel like that was much more mandated, which I'm not sure was a great thing. People that I know that sat around and waited for big counties to decide how they were going to do it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of lost time and a lot of creativity that just fell flat.
Wow, this sounds like an article to me, honestly, about this observation, because this seems really critical.
Well, I think especially if you consider it from the parents' point of view, that I don't know, there were some parents in my class that wanted that synchronous learning. They wanted it to be like the school day, but just on tape.
Yes.
And they thought that a kid would come, sit at his desk at 8 and have a break for lunch and a break to use the bathroom, and that would be better. It would almost be like he was being babysat in a way at home. And the people that I took most of my cues from, that Hong Kong group, they were like, absolutely not. That's not going to work. And in my own heart, I didn't feel like it was going to work because it barely works during the school day.
I was going to say.
As far as like, you know what I mean? Like you have to really be like working that.
Really? Or be really scary. One of the two. Oh my God.
There have to be like huge consequences.
Seriously, the Hulk comes in as your first grade teacher. Oh my gosh. Did, at the end, what was the response of the kids and the parents to your teaching?
It was almost all positive. I think there were, I cited 24 such parents. I would say, I probably had 20% that thought it could be different.
Yeah.
Would that be like 5 out of 25? Yeah, right?
You're better at math.
So, I would say I had 20% that were like, I had one mother, very nice and not an unsupportive parent, but she was really disappointed that I didn't have more differentiated lessons.
Okay.
Like, could you have something for like a kid who's struggling, a kid who's really excelling?
Yeah.
I had no time to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Like I would try to do it, but it was like every 10th lesson that would happen.
See, that sounds to me like the 7th day would be required to create those materials.
I thought so. First of all, they are truly created. They're not included in anything. Even in the classroom, that's pretty created.
Yeah.
And that was hard. The only thing we had that addressed that was a remedial reading group that met 4 days a week with a reading teacher.
Okay.
And she did a good job with it.
Okay. Did you sense any joy? You mentioned that word about a student that when you're in the classroom, you can sort of tell what students are joyfully attending.
Right.
Did you sense that joy at all, even though it was translated virtually?
It was harder to see that. I didn't see it a lot. I think what I noticed from what they wrote, my best thing I did, I think, was creative writing this year during the virtual time. Okay. And that had a lot of advantages in a virtual way. Notwithstanding the fact that they had a parent at home to help them, because it's a hard thing in the classroom with a lot of little kids.
Yes.
But they were the right age to be really like cranking it up and everything.
Right.
But I had a lot of success with that. But what I noticed with their writing is how much they were enjoying spending time with their parents.
Oh.
They really, really did. I had one outlier in that seemed very unhappy at home. But most of them really, really liked it. They just miss their parents a lot. During the day, even in first grade, they'll say, I miss my mom, and like to go home, and, they really do. And just in the way that our economy is now, hardly any of them, and these are privileged kids, hardly any of them have their parents after school, and so I think they liked that.
Oh my. Is there something you liked about it? The equivalent of the kids enjoying their parents.
I liked having a break from managing the crowd.
Okay.
It made the teaching a little purer in that way.
Okay.
Or it strengthened my instructional planning because, talk about being used to, building the plane while you're flying it.
Right.
That is really what my day is a lot.
Yes. With first grade, for sure.
Yeah, sure. And things really can go south. Somebody is off in their mood and, there's just a lot of that.
Okay.
So I felt like that it was less exhausting. Although I was working more hours, I didn't feel as tired.
Okay, that's interesting.
I don't think everybody, like I have a friend that said that she had a lot of trouble with energy and stuff at home. And she thinks it's because she just wasn't getting as much physical activity.
Okay. And it, I want to say for the audience listening that in addition to you being a teacher, you're also a wife and mother of 2 teenagers. Yeah. So that was simultaneously happening on those 6 days that you were doing your quote job. You had 2 teenagers at home in varying degrees of virtual learning.
Close quarters.
Yeah. Well, I'm giving you the big red apple on your table.
Oh, thank you.
All right, honey. Well, thank you so much.
Right.
And we'll talk later. I know that.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So as I end this podcast, she still does not know what the plan is for, quote, restarting school. And it's August 3rd. I interviewed her last week, the final week in July. And as we all know, that is the case for a lot of teachers. But I can't thank her enough for doing this. And the moment that really stood out for me was just before we started the podcast. She had told me that her kids really missed their friends. Because remember now, this was a class that had been operating normally, a first grade class, up until March. And so they had made their new friends during the course of the fall and the early winter and just the start of spring. But in the interview, she also said that she thought that while they didn't have the joy of being in school with their friends, they did have the joy of having their parents around, and that she could really sense that a lot of them just simply loved that. And she acknowledged that most of them, despite being in some cases privileged kids, both parents may be working, and so they just don't have the opportunities to be around them as much as they were during this period. And I just thought it was one of those things that I hadn't thought about in the course of these months, but because I know parents found this a very challenging period of time for them as parents. So they may not have realized just how much joy their kids were having in having them around. Okay, so take care of yourselves. I think I'll have another great interview for you next week. Over and out, as my father used to say on his ham radio.